Hello everyone, Minute Plus Meditation here, Thursday, September the 21st. It is the feast of St. Matthew, Apostle. He's a patron saint, by the way, of customs officers and accountants. No surprise about accountants because he was a tax collector, right? So he was an accountant. First reading, I should say, is from the Epistle to the Ephesians. I, prisoner in the Lord, beg you to lead a life worthy of the calling to which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, making every effort to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. So this is a constant theme of St. Paul and, of course, of the other apostles, because remember, Jesus prayed that we all may be one. And structurally speaking, they were one in the days of the apostles, but we see how quickly that would be subject to fracturing and division because of people coming in. St. Paul would identify them as, worms or wolves coming in with their egos, not linked with or associated with the apostles or submissive to the apostles, and causing division in the church. And this is independent of the worthiness or the uprightness or the holiness of the apostles, although they were saintly men. But it's the fact that Jesus established this structure and has always raised up saints, if you look through the history of the church, when the individuals in the magisterium have gone off base. So Francis of Assisi was called to call the church back to poverty, Benedict and so on to prayer, to moral purity, and down through the centuries this has happened over and over and over again. So Jesus prayed for unity, and unfortunately, you and I can all too often be the cause of disunity or of division or fracturing in the church by our witness or lack thereof. So it's something we have to be we have to pray a lot for, no matter how impossible it seems. But we have to pray for this, and we have to do our very best to work for unity by starting with ourselves and praying that God would help us to be saints, because the saints really are men and women who are unified within themselves, and they are therefore more effective in unifying all of God's people. Over to the gospel. It is, of course, St. Matthew's gospel. As Jesus was walking along, he saw a man called Matthew sitting at the tax booth, and Jesus said to him, "Follow me." And Matthew got up and followed Jesus. As Jesus sat at dinner in the house, many tax collectors and sinners came and were sitting with him and his disciples. So right away this shows, first of all, don't judge a book by its cover, right? Matthew was probably considered scum by his people, his scum, all right? Because he's a Jew, he's a tax collector, he's cooperating with the Gentiles, he's probably stealing money, charging more than what was owed to the Romans. That's the way these tax collectors operated. He was scum to his people. He was hated. They would have killed him if he was caught alone. He probably had a Roman guard with him to protect him. His society was very small amongst other tax collectors. So, but still, don't judge a book by its cover, right? Obviously, there was something in him longing for more, and Jesus fit the bill. And that disposition was always there because it didn't take him long. Maybe he had heard the master preach or heard about him, was already curious, was open. But as soon as Jesus calls him, he leaves just like that. And he doesn't look back. It's just stunning how often you and I vacillate. We're up and down like a seesaw. We give Jesus 90%, we take it back, to 50. We give him 100, we take it back to 30. We're just like this all the time, But Matthew seems to have never looked back, like Lot, never looked back. He just kept following Jesus, and I think that's our model. You and I have to keep following Jesus, keep our eyes focused on him. And as Catholics, we have that in the Eucharist. We have Jesus in the Eucharist. We got to keep our eyes focused on Jesus in the Eucharist. We got to keep our eyes focused on Jesus in confession, because Jesus is there in confession. We're not confessing to the priest directly. We're confessing to Christ directly through the priest. Priest is only the instrumentality that Christ has set up so we don't play games with ourselves. Come on, let's admit it. Wouldn't it be nice if I could go to confession to myself? Give me a break. Come on, everybody who sees this should laugh, because we'd all go to confession to ourselves if we could, or we'd say, Jesus, I'm sorry. He's not going to speak to us like we could just say it like we're talking to the air. How easy is that, How easy, but when you have to do it through another human being, then it's humbling and humiliating. You get transparency, you get accountability involved. The real rubber hits the road when you got to go to confession. We all know this as Catholics. But that's the way Jesus knows the human heart. We gotta, so we gotta meet Jesus in confession. We gotta follow him in confession. Yes. And when we do this, particularly with Mass and confession and Mass, then like Matthew, we may be tempted to look back, but we'll get right back and start following Jesus again. God bless you.